United we fall, a story of family, of betrayal, of trust, of unity, of survival. An original audiobook. Chapter 5. She wasn't crying now. In fact, she was about 1,000,000 miles away from tears at this moment. When his hands started pulling her legs apart, it was like a tightly stretched cord was being pulled beyond its limit until, snap! Her breathing now slowed down, and she was no longer nervous. As he continued to push her legs open farther and farther, she started to squirm and writhe. She arched her back in what looked like a yawning type of motion, and she reached her arm out toward him, grabbing and caressing the back of his head gently but forcefully. His eyes now widened in excitement and anticipation of his awakening lover. Then she pulled his head inward even closer to her. He turned slightly, repositioning to better gain access to her entire body. He was smiling now. She was also smiling. She continued to caress him, but now she pulled at him even harder. He did not try to resist. It was his turn to feel high now. Her aggressiveness was an aphrodisiac. Her other hand hung over the edge of the bed. He was thinking of the many things that she could do to him with that free hand, when she almost violently snatched his head closer to her face. His ear was next to her mouth when she whispered seductively, "Do you love me, baby?" "Yes," he said, nearly yelling. His lust was overwhelming. He had made love to his wife in a few weeks, and his built-up passion for her was becoming too much for him to control. Her free hand disappeared over the bed's edge for only a moment. Then she said to him, "Did you love that bitch?" Her sweet, sexy voice became a nightmarish shrill. He never even had a chance to look up before that free hand reappeared holding an 8-inch butcher's knife, a knife which she quickly raised and plunged deeply into his muscular back. He stiffened, screamed, and recoiled into a ball, instinctively trying to reach the wound. "Did you?" she said, with a calm coldness that was more frightening to him than her previous scream. Maybe don't," he begged, but the blood-stained knife was already on its way back toward him. "Did?" She slashed his flailing arm. He screamed again. "You?" This time it was his leg that received the cutting edge of the knife's blade. His wailing reminded her of the sound that a dog makes when it gets hit by a car. "Love?" She punctured his neck. He was saying something now, but she couldn't understand him. "That?" Now it was his back again. "Bitch!" And she stabbed and stabbed and stabbed her husband until, finally, with both hands, she slammed the knife into his back so hard that she felt it make contact with bone. There was silence now, with the exception of the sound of him saying, "I love you," to that other woman, echoing over and over in her head. He lay still with the knife protruding from his naked, bloody back. She looked around her and saw blood everywhere. She was winded now, panting, trying to catch her breath. She was smiling now. The nightmare was over. No more lies, no more fear, no more wondering if he was going to hurt her again. No more pain. She sat there for quite a while, eyes closed, basking in the peaceful warmth of her newfound serenity. Then she felt wetness on her face, dripping down her cheeks. She could now hear the sirens growing louder and louder, piercing her wonderful silence. The noise grew to an unbearable pitch. The wetness on her cheeks ran heavier. She closed her eyes even tighter now, as if to magically make it all stop. But her face only got wetter and wetter, and the sirens only got louder and louder until she let out a frantic, blood-curdling scream. Her desperate scream was cut off abruptly when she felt hands touching her. Strong hands. Hands grabbing hold of her shoulders. Her eyes opened widely. They were his hands. A look of shocked horror covered her face as she looked at him. There was no blood. She looked around the room and did not see a blood stain anywhere. "Huh?" she said, through her now heavy breathing. "Baby, what's wrong?" he asked. Her eyes continued to survey the room for some evidence of the struggle, of the massacre that had taken place here tonight. She still felt the wetness dripping down her cheeks, and she snatched away, breaking free of his grip, and wiped her face. She looked into her hands and discovered that there was no blood, only tears. The siren. She still heard it, but now it wasn't a siren at all. It was her alarm clock blasting out its scheduled wake-up call. "Are you okay, honey?" he asked, leaning forward to look into her eyes. She was very confused now, and returned his gaze, searching for answers within his eyes. "Yeah," she said in a voice that was barely audible. "I guess I just had a really bad dream." He put his arms around her and pulled her in tightly. "It's okay, baby," he assured her. "It's all going to be just fine. I love you," he said to her lovingly.